Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Bull Take Scouting Podcast. This past week was the Senior Bowl, which, as you know, is a huge event in the NFL pre-draft process, as you've got about 100 of the most highly touted seniors entering the draft that get together and just for a week practice one-on-one, 7-on-7, get through it, put through so many drills, and you really get a lot of guys who stand out and boost their stocks. And, that's what we're going to be talking about today. And we're going to start with the quarterback class because, it was a big opportunity for all these quarterbacks because there's not really a consensus on who's the top guy who really deserves to be a top 10 pick. Alex, do you think that any quarterback really was convincing this week in propelling themselves at the top of this class?
I really don't think so. I think from seeing what scouts have said, I think people have been torn on a lot of the quarterbacks and how they performed this week at the Senior Bowl. So just in terms of the NFL draft, I really don't think that anyone really cemented themselves ahead of anyone else.
I agree. I've seen a lot of love for Malik Willis out there in the media, but anything he did at the Senior Bowl is something that you could see in 5 minutes of watching him on tape. I think that a lot of people in the media saw some of these splash plays, his elusive running, his absolute gunslinger of an arm, and pretty much labeled him a Senior Bowl winner. But I don't think that he really moved the needle because what he did really well on tape, he did really well at the Senior Bowl, and that's being able to have these really explosive plays both with his arm and with his legs. And what he struggled to do on tape either isn't a factor at the Senior Bowl, like reading complex defenses or in-game decision making, and or he still did struggle, which is just pretty much being in tempo, getting the accurate reads, and accurately delivering the ball. So I don't think he stood out too much. I think that Kenny Pickett really didn't help himself too much either. Pretty much looked like a game manager at the next level, which is not good because he's trying to convince scouts that he's more than that. He can be a real franchise quarterback who can change your team. And then who I thought was the biggest loser of this quarterback class was Carson Strong. And I think the rest of the quarterbacks, they really just didn't move the needle. And I think Strong moved himself backwards, actually. He struggled to do things that he did well on tape, which is the weird part. He could not hit the deep ball throughout the week, which is so odd because when you turn on the tape, that's one of his biggest strengths. So I was really surprised by Strong, and that could push him out of round one. And when a quarterback isn't deemed a round one quarterback anymore, their range really lowers.
Yeah, I think to talk about Malik Willis first, I mean, like you said, the Senior Bowl was kind of set up for him to really showcase his talents. Our biggest concerns with Willis, we talked about them in depth in our quarterback podcast, his ability to process the field and read complex defenses. And like you said, a week of practice, defenses aren't going to be running anything complex. And he's also, you're not allowed to hit the quarterbacks. So he kind of could run free when he could. So he put his skills on display. So, yeah, he might have looked like the best quarterback there, but that's because his skill set was, like I said, set up for him to succeed at the Senior Bowl. So I agree. I wouldn't really chalk him up as a huge winner. But, I mean, people are really talking about him maybe going top 10. So, I mean, I guess we could consider him a Senior Bowl winner if this really did help propel him into the top 10. And
Go ahead.
Regards to Kenny Pickett, I think the rain really hurt him. I know he struggled day 2 in the rain, and you'll also have the concerns with his hand size. He didn't measure because whatever was going on, his hands are too small, his thumbs double jointed. It's not really a thing, but anyways, so to me, a massive concern with Kenny Pickett honestly was the rain. And you said maybe those two didn't really move the needle either way. I'd argue that Kenny Pickett maybe moved the needle backwards a little bit because, I mean, you're playing in the NFL, unless you're in a dome, I mean, you're going to be playing in the elements. You're probably going to be playing in the rain. And if he struggles playing in the rain in the Senior Bowl, I'd be a little bit concerned about how he's playing at the NFL in poor weather.
Yeah, I think that it's important to understand that NFL evaluators are going to know that some of Kenny Pickett's strengths were really not translatable to a Senior Bowl style of play, style of practice. He's just a really good game manager. He makes good decisions. He makes a good processing of the field, and that's just not really what you get in some of this Senior Bowl setting. But as you said, I think that is a good point. I think that the hand size is going to be a debate throughout the process, and it might be one that's more fueled in the media than in actual NFL draft circles. But that showing in the rain definitely didn't help. And at the same time, he's got 4 years of being a starter on tape in college. The NFL scouts are going to go back and find the games where the elements were against him, even if they were before he fully developed as a quarterback, just to see if the hand size concern is really founded. At the end of the day, having watched a lot of his tape, I don't think it's that big of a concern, but he might have moved the needle backward, and he definitely didn't take an opportunity to cement himself as the QB1 that the talk was that he would be in this class coming into Senior Bowl.
The one thing I will say about Kenny Pickett, though, that I have actually been reading, especially if you look on Twitter with scouts and stuff like that, everyone said that he was ahead of everyone else, all of the quarterbacks in the interview process. I saw, I can't remember who it was, but they said they asked the scout, what's your order on the quarterbacks in regards to the interviews? And they said it was Kenny Pickett and everyone else. So that definitely will help Kenny Pickett, because a lot of these teams take the interviews very seriously between both the Senior Bowl and the Combine. Sometimes people say the interviews are more important than what actually goes on the field. So that definitely should help Kenny Pickett. The one thing I want to say about quarterbacks, possibly the biggest quarterback winner of the Senior Bowl was a guy that didn't play in Matt Corral, because Matt Corral benefits because none of these other quarterbacks really were able to move the needle forward. And now, obviously Corral didn't play in the Senior Bowl, but if he's, in contention for this top quarterback spot, both of us have him as our QB1 right now. That honestly, it just makes him look better that all the other quarterbacks didn't move the needle forward.
Yeah, the best quarterback in this draft class was not in Mobile this week, and it showed. Now, that's not to say that Matt Corral is a slam dunk, surefire franchise quarterback. He's got his share of concerns, but to me, I take him over any other quarterback in this class. I think the primary concern is durability, and if you just rein in his aggressive play style, make him take less hits, slide when appropriate, that concern can really get reduced. And then as a player, I think he offers a lot, the right balance of upside and ability to do the finer things of the position. Like Willis has a lot of upside, but can't really read defenses and all that right now, while Pickett is just that doesn't have the explosive traits, and that's what hurt him at the Senior Bowl. But as you said, interviews are really important. So, the hand concerns might have lowered him a little bit, but I think interviews brought him back up to the point where maybe he didn't move the needle too much. And yeah, at the end of the day, I'd say Strong was the loser of this group. Nobody was the real winner. Maybe a little bit Willis, maybe a little bit Matt Corral, but at the end of the day, we didn't see too much in terms of affecting draft stock from these quarterbacks. So let's get into the guys who did really improve this draft stock. Alex, for you, who was the biggest winner of any position at this Senior Bowl?
Devonte Wyatt. I think he was dominant as a defensive lineman. You see some of the defensive lineman highlights, and he shows how good of a defensive lineman he was at Georgia. I think he was a little bit overshadowed because of Jordan Davis. But I think we talked about this before the national championship game. We both thought that Wyatt is a better football player all around than Jordan Davis. And I mean, he put all his skills on tape at the Senior Bowl. He showed a wide variety of pass rush moves, in my opinion. He was extremely strong, was able to bull rush offensive linemen. And we might see a little theme here between defensive linemen and offensive linemen in a second. And maybe that will foreshadow your biggest winner in the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, I agree that Wyatt helped himself a lot. In December, I had him graded higher than Jordan Davis, and I still do. He's the more complete player. He's maybe not quite as dominant against the run, but the tiny bit he gives up there, he more than makes up for against the pass, because he's just so much more mobile. Naturally, he's lighter than Jordan Davis, who's really just absolutely enormous. Wyatt showed his ability to both stuff the run and be able to be explosive, work his hands, get to the passer. He did that all week at the Senior Bowl. My biggest winner, though, is a different defensive tackle, and that's because I think his starting position in terms of NFL draft stock was lower. So he's the one who's made the biggest jump, but that's Travis Jones, defensive tackle from our university, UConn. Not often that we get to shout out UConn in terms of football, but As two UConn students, we sure are proud of him, and it's not even a biased pick. A lot of people are saying that he's helped himself the most consistently throughout the week. He was showing his speed to power. He just walked back so many offensive linemen, getting into their chest and just driving them back. It was really impressive, and I think the big question is if the traits are there to that extent, and it was so clear that they are during the Senior Bowl, why did he look pretty ordinary on a bad UConn defense throughout the season? You'd think that playing next to guys that he's so much better than, he would look like he's that much better than them. Like you have the typical saying of on a small school team, if there's a guy who's an NFL draft prospect, you shouldn't have to look up his number beforehand when you go watch the tape. It should pop immediately because he's playing next to guys who don't have a future in football. And I think when you go to Travis Jones's tape, that's not really the case. So that's really what he's going to have to answer. But boy, did he move himself up this week, because he was one of the among a lot of first, second round picks. He was one of the very best players there. And I wouldn't be surprised if he rises all the way into the top 50, honestly.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, in regards to maybe him not standing out on tape as much as you would like from a small school guy, I think when it comes to, some defensive linemen, because they're that good, the offensive line can focus on that one player. You're going to win all the other one-on-one matchups, so you can, double team him constantly, always have a guy there to chip him and help protect. So I think in some ways, yes, that's true. But in other ways, if they're that much better than everyone else on their team, then the offense can focus on them so much more than everyone else. And it does make it hard a little bit. But, I agree. Like you said, his draft stock probably rose more than half a round, maybe a full round. But I think he's definitely solidly in that round 2 conversation. And like you said, I would not be surprised to see him in the top 50 in April.
This is a draft process where things can get so different from the beginning of it in December to April that, he might go past the second round. We've seen similar rises of guys who seem like, day 2, maybe even day 3 picks, they end up being first round picks. Travis Jones might just keep rising because with those athletic traits, he could shine at the combine too. But now let's turn our eyes to other winners, and I'm just going to give 2 names, then you can give 2, and I'm going to stick right on that defensive line because, as you alluded to, they dominated all week. They got the better of the offensive linemen. That setting in the Senior Bowl where it's 1v1, you don't have anyone chipping, you don't have anyone else next to you on the offensive line. It automatically gives the advantage to the defensive lineman. But boy, did they make the most of that, because you usually don't see this discrepancy in dominance as much in other years, and the defensive lineman dominated all week. And for me, Jermaine Johnson, the defensive end from Florida State, he came in as my highest rated player of anybody at the Senior Bowl, and he played like the absolute best player there. He just showcased every reason why he's an extremely well-rounded player who's going to have a great NFL career. And my other big winner on the defensive line is Parrion Winfrey, the defensive tackle from Oklahoma. I loved his traits. I just thought that technique was really lacking, and that's why he was pretty inconsistent at Oklahoma, but I think he had a great week. It shows that he's improved his handwork. He's been going to work since the season ended at Oklahoma, and with those kind of traits and that kind of performance against top competition at the Senior Bowl, I think he's rising also potentially into the top 50 alongside Jones.
Yeah, I think Jermaine Johnson, you saw those one-on-ones. Like you said, he was dominant. You saw some really, really good pass rush moves, great speed, great ability to convert speed to power. And like you said, Parrion Winfrey, to see a defensive tackle win the defensive MVP of the game, I don't take too much into account in regards to the game. It's a little bit weird. I take the one-on-ones, more into consideration scouting wise, but still to see a defensive tackle win defensive MVP of the game definitely says something about how he played both throughout the week in practice and in the game. My 2 other winners, I'm going to start with Zion Johnson, the interior offensive lineman from BC. And to me, he pretty much played guard his whole time at Boston College. And NFL scouts want to move him to center. And you saw him practice center a lot at the Senior Bowl, and he was very impressive. I think he displayed great movement ability. But the number one thing to me that showed was his work ethic. He was out there, and you would read it. He was out there practicing snaps every single day after practice, including on day 2 in the rain. When everybody else was inside, he was practicing working on those snaps. So to me, yes, he played very well, but seeing that work ethic, seeing someone want to get better at a position that they've never played before is a huge plus for Zion Johnson. And then Trevor Penning, a small school guy, he was extremely aggressive in the one-on-ones, and he was pretty dominant. I think he got beat a few times, but to me, he was definitely able to almost solidify him as maybe a late first-round pick because of how aggressive he was. And reading up some stuff about some of the small school guys in the Senior Bowl, what scouts like to see from them is super aggressive, really wanting to be the alpha male because they come from such a small school. And Penning definitely showed that at this Senior Bowl. So to me, another reason why he was a winner this week.
Yeah, that reminds me. Something I heard was that Ali Marpet's agent a few years back, when he came and absolutely dominated the Senior Bowl, told him, "You got to make sure that you're tussling, you're almost picking fights with these guys, throw them to the ground, butt heads, because you got to show NFL scouts, you're a D3 player, you're a small school guy, but I mean, you're just as tough as anyone else on that field." And Penning was the toughest man on that field all week. I think he measured up a lot to what he looks like on tape, where you've got all the traits: size, strength, athleticism, mean streak. You just got to really work up the technique. And you said late first. I think you go even earlier. From what we're hearing, I wouldn't be surprised if he was a top 20 pick. As for Zion Johnson, I just like to say he actually played tackle for most of his career at BC. And then this year he came back, shifted to guard, was a lot better, and then showed at the Senior Bowl. He can slide into center too, so that versatility is key. He's just a rock solid guy, one of the safest picks in this draft. If you're late first, early second, you're getting a quality starter, and you can't go wrong with Zion Johnson. But I think now we got to turn to guys who lower their stock, and usually you get more of the winners than the losers. That's part of that, is that they stand out more. But I think a couple of offensive linemen here really missed their opportunity to capitalize on a lot of buzz that they had coming into the week. One of those is a player I really like, Bernard Reiman. I thought he'd perform a lot better, but he had his fair share of struggles, just showing that he's only been playing this position, offensive tackle, for 2 years, getting bent back by speed to power. And he showed his athleticism is really good, but both his strength and his technique could use some work. And then the other offensive lineman who I think is sliding after the Senior Bowl is Daniel Fellaille. I thought that the absolute massive man, he's just one of the biggest offensive linemen that you see coming through the NFL draft ranks, was going to go pretty high in this draft because he can move remarkably well for that size too, but he struggled all week. He was getting beat left and right. The technique just wasn't there. And I think he's going from a guy that scouts thought was, a good bet. You coach him up a little bit, he's going to be a really quality starting level tackle, to someone who's maybe more of a project than we anticipated after seeing his performance this week.
Yeah, I mean, in regards to Reiman, I think that, like you said, experience is key. A lot of these guys have been playing football for a long time, and he's only been a tackle for 2 years. So yeah, his stock probably lowered a little bit, but again, I wouldn't be too concerned because he's still a raw tackle prospect. In regards to Fellaille, a little disappointing. He was a guy that I enjoyed liking when we were scouting him, just because he's so big. Everybody loves seeing the massive guys do well, or the really small guys do really well. But he might almost be too big. I think, the pass game, he really struggled. Like you said, he got beat quite a bit. The run game, he looks pretty good. Obviously, he's 390 pounds, so he's going to be pushing guys all around. And, I saw a few clips of him just shoving a linebacker with one arm right to the ground. He has so much power. But I just think, yeah, he might have some athletic traits, but to me, they don't translate to athletic offensive tackle. It's just athletic traits because he's a really big guy and he moves well for his size. And then, so my two losers, I'm going to start with Darion Kendrick, the cornerback from Georgia. And I really think he got beat all week deep. He kind of lacked speed that I was hoping to see this week. And he was getting beat slants. If he couldn't get his hands on the wide receiver early, he was losing reps, and he really struggled to recover once he was beat. And I know you thought he was pretty good. His tape was pretty good at Georgia. I just wonder how much of that was a benefit of how good Georgia's front seven was. And I think, seeing him get beat in one-on-ones might say that, yeah, the front seven definitely helped him at Georgia. And then my other loser, Dontario Drummond, the wide receiver from Ole Miss, he was a guy that I really thought was a pretty good wide receiver prospect while scouting Matt Corral. But he showed some drops on tape, and he had quite a few drops at the Senior Bowl. So for me, at least, if I see a wide receiver struggle with drops on tape, and then he goes to the Senior Bowl and his drops aren't any better and, might have gotten worse because it's only a week of practice, that's pretty concerning for me and probably not a receiver that I would be too interested in drafting.
Yeah, when you see a receiver who's got a lot of the traits that you like, and Drummond definitely can get open with really shifty, crisp, sudden routes. You want to believe in those natural abilities, and sometimes try to forget about some of the drop issues. But man, there's just such a strong correlation between how good your hands are and the level of success you reach in the NFL. You see so many guys who their one negative is their hands, where it's not that bad, but they're still really good college wide receivers. But then once they get to the NFL, it just doesn't work out, because if your coach is going to trust to put you on the field and your quarterback's going to trust to put the ball in your hands, you got to be able to make catches that you should be making. Drummond did not make those catches this week, and so he's definitely sliding from a player who could have cracked day two to maybe even past the fourth round at this point. And as for Kendrick, I think that you're right. It's going to make a lot of evaluators look back at his tape and wonder, how much of this was the front seven and the scheme also that was preventing him from getting into tricky situations deep, because he's got really good fluidity and quickness in terms of covering short routes, but maybe deep he struggles, and that was definitely shown at the Senior Bowl. So now let's close off our episode with a bold take each about either a player or a position group at the Senior Bowl. It is our brand, and we always like to stick to it when we get the chance, because we're not afraid to give opinions that seem like they're not popular right now, but down the line we could be hanging our hat on that. So Alex, would you like to start off with this?
Yeah, so I'll start off again talking about guys in the trenches. My bold take from the Senior Bowl will be the top 3 Senior Bowl offensive linemen will all go in round 1. So that would be Trevor Penn, Bernard Reiman, and Zion Johnson. I've heard some good things about all of them going in round 1, and I think even though Reiman might have been a loser this week, I still think he has the upside to keep him in the round 1 conversation.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with that, given that evaluators know that he's only been playing offensive line for 2 years. So I wouldn't say that the performance is excusable, but they know the upside that he possesses, and that's what NFL teams chase, is upside. So I wouldn't be surprised to see these 3 guys go first round. And my bold take is that Minnesota defensive end Boye Mafe will go in the first round, and that's I strongly doubt that that's a name you've seen in the first round of NFL mock drafts. If you have, definitely send that my way, because I sure haven't seen him anywhere. But he's just got incredible traits, such great burst and bend around the edge, with also the ability to convert speed to power to go through his blocker. And you see flashes of what he can be at Minnesota. And we've seen the last few years, some of these guys immediately get to the NFL and they can convert their traits to production at a higher rate. I'm thinking especially of Jason Owe last year, who had 0 sacks at Penn State, but had a really impactful rookie season at in Baltimore. And what I thought when I was watching Boye Mafe was that I don't really understand why you would take David Ojabo from Michigan in the top 10 when you can just take Boye Mafe later, because I thought they had a really similar skill set, and the difference in talent between them wasn't as great as to warrant almost a full round in difference in NFL draft projections. So I think that the NFL is definitely catching on to that more than the media is. And with his traits and how he flashed to the Senior Bowl and how he's going to blow the roof off this combine, I think that there's a good chance he sneaks into the end of the first round.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. He's not a guy that I've been able to really scout yet, but definitely from what I've been hearing about his athletic traits, scouts at the combine love guys that blow up the combine due to their athletic traits. And yeah, I mean, if he really shows up at the combine, I would not be surprised to see him in the late round 1 conversation.
Yep, and I think that wraps it up here. The Senior Bowl is always such a fun week, and because when you think about it, this isn't just something that draft nicks like to shove down your throat. There's so much that value in the Senior Bowl. The guys that star in the Senior Bowl end up being stars in the NFL. Cooper Kupp, man, that guy lit up the Senior Bowl a few years ago. See what he's doing now. So I hope you've enjoyed this show, and keep an eye on these winners that we talked about down the line, because NFL success sure is coming their way. And we'll be back with another episode next week. Thanks for tuning in, guys.
I know you ended the podcast. Next Sunday's the Super Bowl. We don't have another podcast before the Super Bowl is on. So do we want to make our Super Bowl predictions right now?
Sure. You know what? Give me the Cincinnati Bengals.
Me too. I'm rolling with Joe Burrow.
All week I've been thinking, that the O-line, the Bengals O-line versus the Rams D-line, it scares me. It makes me want to rethink my prediction, and it makes me lose some confidence in it. But these Bengals, man, I think they're almost destined to win this game. This is straight out of a storybook, just like the LSU 2019 National Championship, and I see the Bengals going all the way.
Yeah, I think we've been doubting them almost all season. Like, they can't keep this going. Oh, they lost to the Jets. They're not for real. We saw week 1 of the playoffs, Joe Burrow got sacked 9 times. He might be in for another 9-sack performance this Super Bowl. But we saw him overcome that. I'd take Joe Burrow any day over Matthew Stafford. He's got a good arsenal of wide receivers at his disposal as well. I'm taking the Bengals. Roll Bengals.
Yeah, all right. So now I think that actually wraps up this episode. My apologies for ending it before we reveal our predictions, but definitely to anyone out there, enjoy Super Bowl Sunday. It comes around once a year, and it's the culmination of so much good football this season. And we'll be back with another episode, like I said, next week. Enjoy it, guys.